Warm welcome to today's meeting. We're looking at your journey to net zero and kind of some of the myth busting around what that means. Obviously, we've been speaking to a lot of members recently. This is becoming something that is, I won't say creeping up people's agendas because I think that's slightly patronising. People have been looking at this for a long time, but I think now as more of the supply chains start requesting green credentials and carbon targets, it's become something that's come to the fore even more. So as I have absolutely no knowledge of this topic, I'm going to hand over to people that do. So I'm first going to hand over to John Gerard from Auditel, who is going to kick us off today. So John, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, thanks very much, James. Let me share my screen and put it into slideshow and confirm with everybody. James, can you see my screen, James? I mean, everybody
else. That's all good. Yeah, you're in presenter mode, no problem.
Okay, so I assume everybody else can see it then. So good morning, everybody, and thanks very much for joining us today, and thanks to James and Katie for arranging this. It's been very much appreciated. So I'm going to talk today about delivering net zero for manufacturing, as it says at the top there. And we're going to there's two elements to this. One is about understanding your net zero journey. So that's looking a bit at things like the basics. What do all the terms mean? Because I find a lot of the times when I talk to people, I make an assumption that I know, for example, what greenwashing is. I know what all the terms and sort of language within the carbon type of industry. I know all that, and I sometimes make the incorrect assumption that other people do. So I cover a little bit at the start about that. I also cover a bit about what is Auditel, what do we do, and then we've got a really interesting one. After about 25 minutes or so, I'll hand over to Laurie from IES, and they do digital twinning. Yeah. That's basically creating a digital representation of a building to enable you to see where the energy is being used, etc. And I'll leave Laurie to go through that in a lot more detail. And I've called it here, maximizing energy efficiencies through technology, because we were having a chat beforehand there, and somebody mentioned the fact that, you know, it's about carbon, but really it's about energy usage. Carbon comes from energy, energy usage. So that, you know, the driver for a lot of people isn't around carbon, it's around energy. So let's move on. So here's the agenda. So intro to Auditel, carbon, the basics, and that's just covering some of the language. Why are people doing it? There's lots of different reasons, and some of them are more important to different businesses and sectors than others. But we'll have a look at what the common drivers are. The options. So there's lots of different programs and frameworks and structures out there. We'll look at some of the options that are available. I'm not going to say which is right for you, because only each one is best for specific business. Yeah. A typical carbon program, I always think that's useful. How long does it take? What happens during that program? Yeah. And then at that point in time, I'll hand it over to Laurie, and he'll take you through digital twinning. Yeah. So as I said, my name's John Gerard. The person who's going to take over is Laurie. He's from IES, and I'm from Auditel. Some key info. It's last 60 minutes, including 10 minutes of Q&A. But as James said, if you want to raise your hand during it, because we don't have a massive attendance on here, we can be a bit more flexible. And if you've got anything you want to raise during and you want to put your hand up, by all means do so. But we will answer questions at the end if you can put them in the chat. And James will be looking after that. Thanks, James. So a little bit about who are Auditel. Well, we were a company that was founded in 1994. First of all, what we are is we're a collection of the analogy I use to get across people is, if you think about a consultancy or even legal firms, what often happens is it's a collection of partners, and those partners are sometimes self-employed in a lot of instances, that work together to deliver either legal or accountancy services. We're kind of the same, Auditel, yeah, and it was founded back in 1994. And we grew out of the deregulation of the carbon industry and the utilities industry. So that was telephones, water, electricity. That was where we grew out of, and we were helping people buy SMEs and manage their energy supplies. 2000, we kind of improved that to what we called full scope procurement. And basically what that meant was any type of operational cost, yeah, And generally within most businesses, there's up to 100 cost centers. So that's everything from print services to waste to cleaning, etc., etc. And we extended our scope to cover all those different cost centers. We really started looking at energy in 2013. We launched ESOS. We have lead assessors. We started delivering energy reduction projects for clients. In 2017, we really started looking at carbon, mostly around SECR and the early adopters and early leaders of looking at their own carbon footprints. You take us through to 2023 now, we have over 100 consultants and we've got 80 who are formally qualified in carbon solutions work, and that formal qualification is, as it says down there, it's BSI, it's associate consultant, and it's formally qualified around what's called PAS 2060, and I'll come on to that a bit later. Yeah, so our mission is to help organizations manage carbon in a measurable, meaningful, and potentially self-funding way. And again, I'll talk more about that a bit later. Yeah, so what we've discovered recently is it's not just about carbon. Yeah, it's more than just carbon now. Yeah, 2 years ago, even relatively not that long ago, when I first got into the industry, it was about carbon footprinting, but it's expanded a lot more. There's a lot more regulatory stuff there now and coming in. There's a lot more reporting required. Sustainability and ESG have become quite hot topics as well. So there's a whole bunch of stuff which is shown by the middle sort of oval there, which is around TCFD. So all the reporting stuff, ESOS, recycling, social impact, CBAM, which is a new thing which is coming out, which is the EU regulations. There's ISO 14001. There's PPNO 621, which might not be as relevant for you guys in terms of the businesses within where you are in this particular sector, but it is for a lot for construction, for example. It's very relevant. ISO 50001, which is your energy management system, SECR. There's governance and there's social impact. And so what the bottom bit here is trying to show is that the audit will cover all of those particular things. So as well as doing the carbon footprint, we offer a range of services across everything. So we have waste specialists within our network of consultants. We have supply chain specialists. Obviously, that's our background is supply chain. We have ESOS and SECR. We have ESOS lead assessors. SECR is, we have carbon specialists for that. Energy, we have a lot of energy specialists. And as I mentioned at the start, it's about carbon, but it's really about energy. It's about making sure you're using energy efficiently, whether that's in your electricity, your gas, your car, whatever, because at the end of the day, it's energy burning that causes carbon. We have carbon specialists, obviously. Governance, we have governance specialists. And what we have a lot in the industry as well is sector specialists. So we have people, that are specialists in manufacturing. That's where I tend to focus. I focus on manufacturing. I focus on, I also look at construction and IT because my background is in IT. So we've got a huge range of specialists and in terms of sector and in terms of things like supply chain and waste, etc. So that's where we come from as Auditel. So a quick look at the basics, and I'll go through these quickly, and it's purely done to provide some context in case anybody is not aware of what the language means. So what are greenhouse gases? There are 7 main greenhouse gases, all the way from CO2 all the way through to NF3. You can see on the diagram there, and there's an explanation of what each of those are and where you mostly find them in that drawing. So if you look at CH4, methane, for example, that's energy generation, fertilizer production, and fuel and antifreeze, all the way through to NF3, which is electronic production. And what's interesting is this number that you can see here. What this basically says is that it's a ton of that methane, for example, is equivalent, to 28 tons of CO2. So you can see a lot of these other gases, apart from CO2, are even more damaging. But the biggest contributor is by far CO2, simply because that's the most gas that's out there. If you look at what comes out the back of your exhaust pipe, there's methane in it, there's CO2, and there's probably N2O as well. But by far the largest quantity of that is CO2. But so what we do in terms of carbon accounting is we take all of those and then we use some tables from the government and we convert all of that into what's called a ton of CO2 equivalent. So that's a ton of the equivalent of all of these, yeah, and we use, as I say, government provided tables, factor tables they're called, yeah, to create to see what the factor is, which we then apply to the usage element, could be miles, could be litres of fuel, to come to the tons of CO2 equivalent for each litre of fuel or for each mile you've travelled, depending on the type of vehicle you've got. So that's what a greenhouse gas is. Yeah, it's not just CO2. There are other elements to it. You might have heard of the scopes. Yeah. So what are the scopes? There's 3 scopes. Scope 1 is direct emissions, and that's basically there's two main elements to that. One is company facilities. So that's the stuff that you burn on site. So that's basically your gas bill. Yeah, for most companies it would be gas. It might be propane. So anything that you burn on site, as I say, you know, in manufacturing, there's more chance of it being something other than gas. Yeah, some of the manufacturing processes might require propane to be burnt or other gases to be burnt. If it's burnt on site in the company facilities, then it's part of scope 1. It also includes company vehicles. So anything that you use to transport goods or, you know, deliver stuff or collect stuff, any company vehicles. Also F gases there as well. So if you have a big air conditioning plant or you use a lot of F gases, yeah, if you remember to the previous, go back to the previous slide, there's your F gases there, PFCs and HFCs normally used in refrigeration. Yeah. So yeah, that's your scope 1. Scope 2 is, for most companies, it's electricity. So it's the stuff that's where the generation is done off-site. So it's electricity, steam, heating, and cooling. Yeah. So that's your scope 1 and 2. Yeah. Scope 3 is everything else. Yeah. It's broken down into 2 bits called upstream and downstream activities. Yeah. So they kind of they to some extent replicate each other to some extent. Yeah. So on the upstream side, you've got your purchase goods and services. So that's your whole supply chain. That's everything that you buy, whether it be elements to make an end product, or whether it be goods, or whether it be printing services, or whether it be water bills, etc., waste, etc. All of that, yeah, falls under purchase goods and services. Yeah, capital goods. So anything that you buy, you've then got to take that into account. Related and fuel and energy related. So it's anything that's not included in scopes 1 and 2. Yeah, is there fuel and energy related. Transport and distribution. So that's basically your courier charges. Yeah. So if you employ couriers and not own the vehicles, that's where that comes in. Yeah. That would be scope 4 for upstream. Yeah. It also includes business travel, waste from operations, employee commuting, and what's called leased assets. So that's all your upstream activities. Your downstream is all your transportation, distribution, processing of sold products, use of sold products. So all of this is about, the transport and distribution is about stuff you send out. Yeah, so the stuff that you deliver to your end customers, and then it's about your products. So it's about processing, use of, and end of life treatment of products. Yeah, there's leased assets, franchises, and investments. So that's the 3 scopes, yeah. And what's interesting, and I'll show it on the next slide, is the big one here for most businesses. Yeah, there's always the exception that make the rule, but most businesses, it will be somewhere in the region of 85 to 95% of a company's emissions will be scope 3. Yeah, so you can see the analogy there being the iceberg. Yeah, where 95% of it is below the water. But interestingly enough, this is I think from last year. Microsoft done very well, and they got their emissions, scope 1 and 2 emissions down, but they had a massive increase in their overall emissions because the scope 3 emissions went up. And what's interesting is that because of the type of business that they run, yeah, their scope 3 emissions are like 50 times the combination of their scope 1 and 2. Yeah, so they have a massive scope 3 emission. Yeah, and that's when for most businesses they're big, and that's the biggest challenge. Scope 1 and 2, relatively simple because it's electricity, it's gas, it's vehicles. So most people will know how much electricity they're buying, how much gas they're buying and using, and how much mileage their own company vehicles cover. So that's relatively simple. But when you start going into scope 3, that's somebody else's that you've then got to work with that other company or supplier to basically get that information from them, and that's where the challenge comes. The other thing is the difference between carbon neutral and net zero. Some people think it's the same thing. It's pretty much not. It really isn't the same thing. Carbon neutral, the key thing is you can get to carbon neutral with what's called buying carbon credits. You may have heard of these carbon offsets or credits. Yeah, you can get to carbon neutral by doing that. So you reduce as much as you can, and then you can buy carbon credits, good quality ones, gold standard, and you can then get to carbon neutral that way. Yeah, some people don't like it. It's not ideal. I think it's a necessary evil at this time. And as time goes by, we can drop it off as technology improves and we can get more ways to reduce the carbon as opposed to offset it. Yeah, I think that's the way to go. But it gives people a target, so people can target carbon neutral in the short term and encourage them on the journey to net zero. Net zero is very different. Net zero is basically you can't get there by really offsetting. Yeah. It's about setting up, and the next slide kind of tries to show what does net zero really mean. So if you look at the left hand side here, this is where we kind of are now. Yeah, so we've got all these GHG emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3, and we've got the CO2 removals, and it's very unbalanced. There's a lot more emissions than there is removals. The idea is that by 2050, what we've got to is we've got the GHG emissions and CO2 removals being equally balanced. Yeah, so that's the idea of it. And to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade, we got to reach net zero emissions no later than 2050. Yeah, so that's what net zero means. So that's the biggest confusion people have is what is the difference between it's the same thing, carbon neutral, net zero. It's very, very much not the same thing. Next one. Okay, so you might have heard me mentioning earlier, there's a thing called greenwashing. Yeah, some people may have heard of it. Some people may not have heard of it. But basically what greenwashing is, it's when a company, as it says at the top there, it makes statements about its products or its operations for marketing purposes. Oh, buy our new product X because it's it's good for the environment type of thing. Yeah, without any real proof behind it of why is it better? What data have you got to show it's better than a comparable product? Yeah, and that's basically when people do that, it's called greenwashing. Yeah, as you might have heard of it, it's been in the news quite a lot. Yeah, now up until about a year ago, maybe 18 months, it was basically the Advertising Standards Authority that policed it. Yeah, and the Advertising Standards Authority is very, very good regulatory body, but it doesn't have a lot of teeth. Yeah, but about 12 months ago or so, the CMA got involved. Now the CMA is the Competition and Markets Authority. Yeah, and you must know this. They have a far bigger stick. Yeah, than the Advertising Standards Authority, and basically they've now dived into this, and they've created what's called a Green Claims Code that you must meet before you make any statements. Otherwise, you could be in trouble. And there's a bunch of the claims are listed here. I won't go through them. Yeah, but it must be truthful and accurate, clear and ambiguous, etc. So you can't just put a statement out there. Yeah, Tesco, I think Tesco's it was, or Sainsbury's done it recently, where they made a statement that basically said, oh, we've reduced our plastic in this product, that they were selling by, I can't remember what the number was, by X percentage. But what they didn't mention was that it was actually a step back in many ways, because the plastic that they'd replaced the old stuff with, was not recyclable, whereas the old stuff was. So they'd actually taken a step back, but he didn't explain it. All he said was we've reduced the plastic. So it looked good on the surface, wasn't so great when you dug to it and underneath. Yeah. The other people that have got involved now with the FCA, and yeah, they've launched their own sustainability disclosure requirements with some anti-greenwashing rules within there as well. So the point here is that there's regulators that have got real teeth and have been shown in the past to take action, are starting to get involved in this. And the EU is obviously, they're actually sort of more ahead probably than the UK. They've got specific laws against it. The UK at the moment is just guidelines. Yeah, it can be enforced by the CMA, but it's not a legal requirement. Yeah, whereas in the EU they've actually adopted something and it's became law. Yeah, about it. And this bit here in the middle is 53 and 40%. That's basically covering the that's covering the bit around the how much. It's an EU figure, yeah. So 53% of claims give vague, misleading, or unfounded information. And my guess is, and I don't know, it's just a guess. My guess is it's probably similar to the UK, yeah. And this whole changes to the regulation and laws is about one, because people will buy based on something that's stated about a product, yeah. And so there is a competitive advantage there. So, why do it? Yeah. Well, I think there's quite a few reasons why you would do it. Yeah. One of the one is recruiting and retention. I mean, although the times have been tough, I think there's still a bit of a challenge on getting retention and recruiting people, and particularly the younger people, and sort of up to 40s and people like that. The younger cohort, they will definitely look towards working for somebody who's demonstrably more green. Yeah, and again, it comes down to greenwashing again. So that's one of the reasons. Marketing opportunity. More and more we're seeing this. In fact, what we've seen recently is that 12 months, 15 months ago, the budget and the responsibility for sort of a carbon program, yeah, would sit within normally QHSE. They normally picked it up, sometimes in finance, yeah. So, but it would generally not sit anywhere around sales and marketing. We've seen a change recently, because what the sales and marketing people have seen is that they're losing out, or potentially they could end up losing out to competition, because it's a way to differentiate yourself in the market. If you can make good, demonstrably safe not recommendations, but statements about what you're doing in terms of carbon. The secret is it's got to have data to back it up. It's got to have some strength behind it. The other one I mentioned earlier is consumer and client demand. Yeah. So what you're seeing now is that the bigger corporations, the large organizations, are starting to. They've looked at the scope 1 and scope 2. They feel that they've kind of got a handle around that. What they're starting to dig into now is the scope 3, which is all their supply chain. So what we're starting to see is that pressure to get the carbon footprint and get an understanding of a baseline, or at least have some form of a program in place, yeah, to allow that to happen. We're starting to see that coming down from the large organizations, the large corporates, yeah, to their supply chain, and basically saying, if you can't do this and you don't do it, then we're going to struggle to give you business, because we're getting demands, yeah, by our investors and our shareholders and etc. Yeah, and regulations as well, yeah, to be able to start accounting for our scope 3, and that's their supply chain. Microsoft made it quite clear when they produced the report that I mentioned earlier, and the other one, they made it quite clear that if you didn't have this, you would not continue to be a supplier of Microsoft. A legal reporting, yeah. That's things like ESOS, SECR, etc. for larger organizations. But again, it comes down to that what's going to probably happen is that ESOS and SECR is going to start to include at least some of the scope 3 stuff. So again, they're going to be pushing it down onto their supply chain. And definitely for this, that comes into effect here, tender returns, PPN 061, 0621, sorry. That's definitely the case that since September 21, if you're bidding for a government contract that's £5 million or over, you must have a carbon reduction plan in place. Yeah. And what's happening is a lot of the larger organizations, because it includes part of scope 3, are forcing that down onto their supply chain as well. And here's a key one: it's increasing costs. As I mentioned earlier, carbon is about energy, and energy costs are very high. So if you can reduce your carbon, you will reduce your energy, or reduce your carbon, you will have reduced your energy costs. 100% guaranteed you have to have done that, yeah, in some way or form. You can't reduce your carbon without reducing your energy costs. It's virtually impossible. There might be exceptions to the rule, but generally that would be the rule, yeah. So that's what's driving a lot of companies as well, is there's an increase in cost, particularly in energy, and getting those costs down. Why aren't people doing it? I think a lack of knowledge and understanding, and the time to correct this. Some people see it as too big a challenge, and what they're concerned about is, because they're not legally obliged to do it, it's easier to say, well, if I do nothing, I don't get beaten up, in social media, and I don't get bad press for the company if I do nothing. If I do something and through ignorance and a lack of understanding and knowledge, I do the wrong thing, I end up getting beaten up. So I'm just gonna do nothing. The challenge if you do that is you've got all these market forces on the other side driving you to do it, and then perceived cost. Yeah. You know, if you do it clever, it can actually, it can by and large, it can pay for itself. So why, you know, overall, why would you do it? The overall thing is reduce costs and doing the right thing. Yeah. Options, lots of options available. Yeah. I'm not going to go into any of these in any type of detail, but I'll cover them briefly. Yeah, and I've given a sort of snapshot of what they cover. So BSI PAS 2060, starting at the top left-hand corner here. That at the moment is the only internationally recognized carbon neutrality standard. There is no other one. Yeah, so if somebody says they're carbon neutral and they haven't got PAS 2060, then it's basically unverified. Yeah. And really they're leaving themselves open to greenwashing, because if you can't verify it, what meaning does it have? There's the 14,064 series of standard, which is 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, and they're typical ISO. They're a structure, they're a framework. Yeah, and in fact, PAS 2060 uses ISO 1464 or the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is another methodology, if you want to call it, or a framework to allow you to collect that data, which then feeds into PAS 2060. The other one that's there is science-based targets. Yeah, some of you may have heard of that. That's a private organization. Yeah, and they basically have a target which is around the whole 1.5. So when you put it in, you have to show that your reduction plan is going to get you down to 1.5 degrees of global warming by that time. Yeah, it's quite popular with a lot of the large corporates. Yeah, and we see quite a lot. We're doing quite a lot of work with larger organizations around aligning what they're doing and making sure it meets the science-based target stuff. It still uses things like Greenhouse Gas Protocol and ISO 14064-1 to collect the data and the methodology to do that. Yeah, but it then puts it into a structure for science-based targets. The one that might be interesting to the manufacturing industry is this one here, which is PAS 2050. Yeah. This is the first internationally applicable standard on product carbon footprinting. So these ones here, these are really around operational carbon. Yeah, so how much your business produces. This is more around specific products. Yeah, so you might have you might see there's a competitive advantage for you in putting product X and saying, well, if I can get this product to be carbon neutral, yeah, then that gives me a competitive advantage. So you do a product carbon footprinting of a particular product. And this is one that's in development. This is 14,068, so part of the same 14,000 family, if you want to call it that. And this is what they're doing here is they're making an ISO carbon neutral standard. And basically it's large part, yeah, based around the PAS 2061. The one thing I wouldn't recommend, yeah, is what I call here alternative carbon neutrality certificates. And they basically come out of online calculators or supplier certified carbon neutral certificates. Yeah, and these are ones that don't really have any standard behind them. And they're the ones where I think if you go down that route, yeah, it looks like a good option. But in actual fact, it can cause problems because there will be nothing behind there really that specifies, particularly if you're going to go down the carbon neutral, yeah, certificate bit and claim carbon neutrality either operationally as a business or for a particular product. So I'll look at what does a typical footprint and reduction plan look like. So going from left to right. So the first thing we would generally do is we'd have a workshop, yeah. I'm just checking the time. Workshop. So that would normally last a day, and then there's a process that we run through, and we collect the data, collect and audit and cleanse all the data. So that's all the bills. It's your output from your accounting systems. It's all of that stuff. We collect all that data and we analyze it and we cleanse it and we make sure it's of good quality. Yeah. The next step we do is we then analyze that data. So we're looking at making sure that all the data's correct, and we run it through those factors, the government factors that I mentioned earlier, the conversion factors. Yeah, we run it through those conversion factors. Yeah, and then we do reporting. We spend 2 weeks doing reporting. We then have an internal audit with an auditor. Yeah, so the analogy to that would be if you get your if you get your audit done, your company audit accounts done, generally before they're handed back to you, the accountants will have an internal audit team that checks them over. We do a similar type thing, and then so then that's where the carbon footprint report is issued. And at that point in time, you've now got enough information that you can start to look at. Okay, so what do I do in terms of a carbon reduction plan now? Yeah, so we have a workshop to look at. I prioritize and look at short and long-term projects, and then we put a plan together. Yeah, and that takes some time, and we look at it and we audit scopes 1 and 2, category 1 for decarbonisation. That's your purchase goods and service, and then we put together costed business cases and project plans for approval. And then there's a 52-week period. It might not take 52 weeks to do it. It might only be 6 weeks, but basically, most carbon footprints cycles will run in 12 months. So for that first year, yeah, you're basically analysing, you're doing the carbon footprint report and then doing your carbon reduction plan. And then at the end of that cycle, you'll then do an update of your carbon footprint report. Yeah, so that's kind of what it looks like. So if you take the 52 weeks out, it normally lasts somewhere. The largest part of it is the 16 weeks, and it could be even longer. Depends how big and complicated the business is. But this here, the collect, audit, and cleanse data is the biggest chunk of work. Yeah, the rest of it is I wouldn't say simple. It takes time, but this is the biggest chunk of work. And even the plan can take less than 12 weeks. Yeah, we're just putting together a plan. Depends how complicated the business is again. But this bit here, 16 weeks is probably about unless you're a really small business. Yeah, this particularly in manufacturing, you normally have complicated carbon emissions. Yeah, it's not 6 weeks is generally a minimum. So I mentioned earlier about how it can save costs. Yeah, so I think the idea is the way that we run a carbon program is that we'll tend to tie it, and I mentioned past 2060 here, it could be any carbon program. We tie it into a cost reduction program at the time, because part of the thing that we do when we're doing the carbon plan, the carbon program is we'll look at your scope 3 is all about your purchase ledger, the stuff that you're buying. Yeah, so we'll look at that we'll look at it from a usage perspective as opposed to pound perspective, and we'll lay a sort of carbon emission overlay on top of it. But our expertise in looking at purchase ledgers, because that's what we've been doing for the past nearly 30 years, yeah, allows us to have a great deal of knowledge about that. And then on one side, you've got all the carbon reduction programs. They're normally broken down into sort of 4 things, which is capital projects. So that could be LED lighting, purchase ledger, carbon audit. Yeah, so that's all your purchase goods and services, and decarbonising that supply chain. And then there's behavioural and business. Behavioural could be making sure that something as simple as making sure people turn their laptops off or the computers off at the end of the day. Business process could be looking at, is there a better way to do business process? Good example here was we were talking to one company and we discovered that they had a particular delivery that was happening. I think it was like 4 times a week. And when we investigated it and talked to the people on the shop floor that actually got it, they said they didn't need it. They only needed it once a week. Well, why is it delivered 4 times a week? That's the way it's always been. Yeah, so that was creating quite a big carbon footprint because we had 4 deliveries. We cut it down to 1, so that's the business process side we can look at. So that's the end-to-end bit that we would look at in a whole carbon program. And I call it smart procurement. So it's looking at your procurement not only from a cost side, but from a carbon emission side. And if you can reduce one, you'll almost definitely reduce the other. So I think that's enough from me. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass over to Laurie. Yeah, who's going to pick up the baton here? So I'm going to stop sharing. Can you pick up the sharing there, Laurie?
Yeah, not a problem.
Okay, so I've stopped sharing.
Excellent. I'll just go into the thing. Excellent. So I'm sure you can see that. So thanks very much, John. That was great. Fantastic. Good to see all that the information there. And thanks again to Katie and James for inviting us along today. So as John kind of touched on, my name's Laurie McKelvey. I work for IES. We're one of the technology partners of Auditel. So today I'm going to kind of introduce the idea of a digital twin. So I appreciate there's a lot of information that you've probably received today. My kind of goal is to kind of show the value of what a digital twin brings, and obviously show that kind of overlap with the Auditel process about increasing your kind of carbon reporting, your footprint, and all of these things, and show how they're very complementary services. That's really the kind of messages I want to get across. So as just a little bit of background just about IES, those who are not familiar, we're home to the largest building physics analytics team in the world. We're in our 30th year of building analysis, and we've got a long history of our technology being used throughout the construction industry. Various sectors like hospitals, offices, manufacturing included obviously as well. 75,000 projects per year using our software, and over 1 million buildings have been modelled using our software as well. So, and actually I think that number is shy, being honest with you, with our kind of more recent work as well. A shameless plug, I suppose, on some of our clients, but really just to stress, we work across various industries, various kind of types of companies. We work with councils, we work with hospitals in different manufacturing facilities all over the world, and we have a long history of delivering these projects, whether it be internal consultancy or people using our software as well. We're also an international company, something I didn't touch on in the previous slide. We have offices in India, Singapore, Australia, North America, and we are very much lodged all over the world as how we deliver our services. So manufacturing and our kind of technology solutions for manufacturing industry, really get into the kind of key messages as we look to energy use reductions, energy cost reductions, carbon reduction, and net zero road mapping. We look at process efficiency and building efficiency improvements. And really the whole idea of this is to increase your production efficiency, reduce energy use, lower your costs, and divest from fossil fuels with net zero road mapping. That's really the kind of one punch line of how we want to, what we want to deliver. And I suppose the why, and it's what John was touching on, is about, the energy crisis. By April 2023, the energy prices are, well, this is now outdated, but energy prices, as we can see, have kind of taken a slight dip, very much predicted to increase over the next couple of months, over the Christmas period, and going forward, who really knows about that? And really kind of focusing on that energy trilemma, and I talk about operational, cost, carbon, and self-sufficiency, especially in manufacturing facilities. How do you ensure you minimise downtime, minimise blackouts, all of these things, manufacturing facilities of all different sizes, not just large scale, but also smaller scale. How do you improve the efficiency of your site to ensure that you can operate 24/7 or whenever required? We look to, through our energy our kind of work, we look to provide a return on investment within 1 year. That's the really key message of this. It's all about, with our digital twin technology, it's all about adding value as early as possible within the work that we do. And really the resulting digital twin is a lifetime asset for your organisation, providing that net zero roadmap in long term. Just a little bit, and I won't dwell on this, but what a digital twin is, it's a detailed digital representation of your asset, the infrastructure, and the mapping of all the energy systems. And on the bottom here, we have this kind of some of the kind of headlines of how the digital twin can really be used. It's that kind of digital replica of your actual building or your processes. Divest from fossil fuels, the kind of lower operational costs, but also kind of softer things such as save on carbon tax. It unlocks funding opportunities. So if you're looking at your site for any funding, we can use the data that we collate and use and forecast as part of your funding application. And we have actually a kind of innovation team that deals directly with clients like yourself, who can support support applications of government funding, for example, ESG reporting, and employee health and wellbeing. Again, all of these things can be kind of extracted from your digital twin. Just to kind of give a high level of how we approach the problem, the kind of key issue on the left-hand side here is commonly people look at in manufacturing facilities as a problem in two parts. They look at the building shell and the building services, how you're providing the energy and compressed air, whatever your services are. They look at it individually, and they have a disconnect between your manufacturing plant and your plant and manufacturing processes. At IES, we look to integrate. We can, if required, look at integrating all of these things into one platform for you to digest all that information. What I would touch on as well is this isn't necessarily required in every single situation. Sometimes looking at just the building shell and building services and some of the process, some of the plant is enough to provide enough insight to any level of site or manufacturing plant. It's really what's suitable for you, for your budget, for what you're looking to achieve. We tailor our solutions to what you require. So our working process, it's quite important just to give you an idea of how we do this. The one thing I will do at the end of this presentation, what I'll do is I've got a small demonstration model, and I'll just visualize some of how we've done this on other sites. So the first process, as most of these things are, is data gathering. It's a big part of what we do. We work with on-site teams, we work with various data sources, we look with live data, with historical data, any bills that you have, and we integrate that into our model. We look at accurate modelling and identification of energy savings. So once that information is in our model, we look at forecasting, we look at providing quick wins, operational savings initially to kind of give that value as soon as possible. And then that last point is that step towards net zero. We can further develop a digital twin to give you the next stage in test scenarios. And how I'll demonstrate that today is I have a kind of 2 dashboard kind of outputs that we can generate through our software that can hopefully provide operational improvements to your building site or multiple sites. So again, just on that, the return on investment piece, the immediate energy efficiency gains. Now, this is a big thing, something we've certainly felt within our experience within manufacturing is there's a kind of tailored preference to look at the end goal, how to not really impact what's happening on site, but let things like business as usual, but deal with the carbon. So carbon storage is a big one at the moment. I think we see a lot of coverage of that in industry and commercial and various. And one thing I will say is that in the more complicated buildings such as manufacturing, there are generally always big energy efficiency wins to be done. We get a lot of success with the more complicated buildings because there's a lot of insight that we can drain into, and it goes into this area of long on data, short on insights. And with the digital twin technology that we have, we can really dive into the whys and how things are performing to really get those savings on energy efficiency first. Again, into this what if scenario, we can do multi-year simulations looking at tariffs, costs, capital, all of these things to provide you with a very high detail, high confidence investment grade decarbonisation roadmap, which includes costs and the real impact of any changes you're looking to make on site. And a quantifiable, measurable, defined net zero roadmap. Again, this is a kind of reporting tool that you guys can use to refer back to be updated over time with updated information. It's fact-based, reportable, costed, measurable, and robust. I'll touch on just a very quick kind of case study. This is our, you can't see that. This is a kind of steel production site that we had in Italy. Again, we've got lots of examples, lots of things we can dive into here. Just a kind of workflow of this, we created this foundry, and the whole idea was to reduce energy consumption. We looked at various different aspects of the kind of the site and how we delivered that. The first thing, we talked about data. So we have a data management platform you can see in the right hand side here. And we basically, for all the tools, with all the services, all the meters, the sensors, everything was put into this data platform. You can see in the left-hand side that there was different levels of information. We had natural gas data, monthly, yearly bills, we had yearly quantities, production. Now, working on site with the team, working remotely, working in various ways, we managed to get really valuable insights that managed to provide a lot of value to this site. But there's no limit to the quality of information that we can look at. Obviously, there needs to be a certain boundary to that, but what I'm trying to say here is there's different levels. We can go down to half-hourly data. We can use anything to really provide these insights. One of the first things we've done was using the meters and all of the different data on site is we just provided a kind of very clear Sankey diagram, and that's really what this was trying to do is say, okay, this is where the energy is flowing through your site, and that includes the waste heat, which is a big opportunity we look at as well. How can the reutilization of waste heat across sites, again, to save money through through reduction of heat demand, for example. One of the outputs, and we looked at various things like, again, waste heat, but also plant replacement, about operational improvements. One of the simple things that we've done was purely about the heating fans in the larger double height space and how we could improve the efficiency. On the left-hand side here, we wanted to improve their performance by running through scenarios of what happens. Can we ensure the similar conditions by improving the operational performance through CFD, like computer data analysis, looking at the airflow across the big double height space to say, can we actually save money just by slight changes to how we're supplying heat to spaces? And we managed to save, just on that heating fan exercise, over 3 months, a 26% savings. So this is just one example of how we could save that energy, just through the analysis, just through the kind of thing. And again, this is based on the real data bills, the real information feeding back into the model. We're able to baseline that. This is our information, but what I'll do is, just before I go into this, I will kind of minimize this, and what I'll do is I will share just a model. And appreciate time, obviously. Just appreciate, and what I'll do is I'll just kind of have a quick fly through, and I'll turn off my camera just for bandwidth's sake. Just fly through a kind of demonstration model I've got here that hopefully will give just a bit of a visual kind of analysis of how we do this exercise effectively. So this was a larger site that we had for, it was a distillery in the kind of southern Europe. We carried out intensive energy consumption and optimization exercise for this site. Now, one thing I would say is this is obviously a larger footprint of site. Our technology is used for single buildings. It's used in cities, towns. It's used in campuses. All of these things. So there's no real limit to that. So there's not really a limit to how small or large the exercises can be undertaken here. So just to kind of a run through of this process as such, we one of the things we've done was the first thing we do is this data collection exercise. Now, each of these buildings, if you think of these buildings in this model, they turn into almost like a digital library of all of the information that's on site. So that includes, say, HVAC services. It includes your floor area. It looks at specification data, all your plant, your bills, your occupancy, your usage. It can even include things like how often the building, the windows open. All of these things provide a really rich level of data for our models. So what you're seeing here is the heating data for each of these spaces. Lighting energy, so we can apply that to see how much each of these buildings are kind of using, how much energy they're using. Total carbon for each of the buildings. So we looked at how much of these, how much they're using. This is the kind of scale here, and then that total energy of each of these buildings. So all of the information feeds into the models, and it provides that kind of rich level of data that not only ourselves can digest, yourselves on site can digest, and Auditel can use as part of their analysis, as part of their kind of reporting. There's also no limit, and one thing I would touch on is about the sorry, I've just gone filter only about the age of buildings. That's something we see along different types of buildings or on sites. Buildings, they're not all built in the last 5 years. We appreciate that there's buildings like in this example, 1967 right into 2013. Sites develop, sites move on as they go on, as manufacturing generally does. Any level of any age of building detail we can use, and we can analyze to give you some insights into that. So again, one thing I just touched on, just to think, this is this area here was the external plant, and I won't dive on this just too much, but one of the challenges we have at manufacturing sites, not just with the age of building, is different BMS systems, different data sources, and external plants. Say you have RO water or CDA or something done by an external contractor. We have the platform that digests all of the information to give you it gives you insight into this model, to give you the insight of all of the energy use, and we integrate all of that into our software for part of the analysis. Looking at pumps, looking at all the meter data, everything goes into our models to give that rich vein of data. For this particular project, one of the outcomes they looked at was energy security. So they looked at PV arrangement. This is our PV kind of they went for on this one. They wanted to look at energy security, to look at battery storage, for example, to protect against you know, kind of brownouts, blackouts, all of these various things. That they wanted to run scenarios, and this is where our kind of digital twin really comes into its own. We have something called an Apache digital twin. And what we can do with that is use our energy model to really integrate and digest all of the potential scenarios on the site. So we can look at, you know, potential for, you know, so for the energy, for your battery storage, can you export that? Can you maximize the usage of it? Can we optimal size it? Can we look at the total amount of PV generation? We have geolocated models which take in real weather data into the analysis about actual PV outputs. And we can look at our electrical emissions right across our site and what's been offset by PV, various things that we can kind of integrate with. Probably the last part, and we talked about this just in that one slide, is that we look at integrating not just the external services, but we look at the shop floor, the tools, the processes, how people interact with the manufacturing thing, and that's obviously an additional element to it, but it really gives that full picture of how we can look at the total energy use and how people work on within your building. That can also be used for scenario basis on your plant. What I mean by that is, say you have particular output that you're looking to meet by the end of the year, you can actually forecast that based on different scenarios, and that would also account for the energy use on site to give you an actual representation of your energy bills over that period of time. What does that mean? Just for a manufacturing plant of, you know, any size, any building complexity. I'll just show two examples of some of the outputs that we can generate, just to kind of wrap things up from my kind of end, I suppose. Just share my screen again, just on a different one. Stop presenting, and I'll share this one. So again, just going back to this kind of decarbonisation roadmap exercise, this is just a dashboard that we generated for a client for 4 buildings. We used the real energy data here. You can see this is the electricity generation. This is the monthly gas information. We calibrated the models to behave to be the same energy use as the actual the real counterpart. Once we do this, we have a digital twin that acts and behaves like the real building, and we ran through these different measures for each of the buildings. So the operational measures, shallow retrofit, deep renovation, and renewables. And when we click around the board here, what you can see is the energy usage kilowatt hours per square meter gets reflected here. How much carbon saved, the investment costs, we integrate the capital costs into this, and what the payback period is. As we get kind of deeper into the deep renovation with like air to water heat pumps and then rooftop solar PVs, we look at all the strategies together, and this is the kind of roadmap that they had. What this provides is investment grade decision making. If you're, for example, looking to apply for government funding, you want to have maximum confidence that you're making the right decision for your site with the technology source that you're looking at. So it might not be that the wall insulation is the right one for the amount of cost, for example. But if you have that confidence in all the data and analysis and the scenario basis that we can provide, it provides that high level, that really high grade, investment grade quality data decision making. And just as a kind of visual, we provided kind of digital decarbonisation roadmaps, and this is all based on real data. So you'll see that the dark blue line is the CO2 emissions now, based on the current CO2 of the grid. But also we have this light blue line, which is based on the grid decarbonisation all the way to 2030. Final thing I just wanted to show is there is also the functionality within a digital twin to provide live monitoring within your site. So this is all live data from actually the building that I'm in currently. This is the electricity data, and we can feed live data into the dashboards with individual KPIs for your site. For example, this is the electricity, the occupancy use of, it just gives a wee second to load. Yep, this here. So this occupancy use against your occupancy to see the direct correlation between. So this is obviously something on our site because we're a high energy electricity user, how that would input it, how that would influence it. And the key thing that we have as well on top of that is that we have this actionable intelligence. This is a direct link between your digital twin and your real data and your dashboards. What we can do here is say run scenarios where each of these measures, when you click on them, gives you the building occupier and decision, actions to take to reduce your carbon, energy and cost on your site. And I think that's a good time to stop.
Thanks very much, Laurie. That was fascinating. I'll go back and share my screen and then just finish off. So if you want to stop sharing there, I'll share mine. If I can get the technology to do it.
See, there's a couple of questions just popped into the box.
Okay. Well, rather, I think what we do is we just take the question now, James. I think it would probably be the best thing to do. So yeah.
Sure, yeah, no problem. One of the questions that came in, it's actually coming not on this chat, but it was the question that I think a few people had asked originally. As an SME, you are starting this whole journey. What's the first thing you need to do? Where do you start? That's always the question we get asked is, there's all these different things I need to start capturing. Obviously, it's data gathering, but what's the first thing that people need to do to start on this journey?
You said it. It's capturing data, yeah. And basically, it's scope. Let's start off with the simple stuff. Scope 1 and 2, yeah. So basically, start collating your bills for your electricity, your gas, making sure that you can, if you've got any company-owned vehicles, making sure that you understand how much mileage they're covering. Yeah, all of that stuff is basically is the start point. Yeah. Because not only is it a start point, if you, however you decide to do it, whether you decide to try and do it internally or whether you bring in a consultant, that's what the consultant is going to do at the start. He's going to say, can you please provide me, your scope 1 and scope 2 data? That's the first thing he's going to ask for, and then he'll just build on, and then the scope 3 data will start to come after that. Yeah, a good idea is to start looking at, I think a good idea is to understand what. Look at your spend, yeah, and see where am I spending money. So if you're spending a lot of money on couriers, for example, the chances are your business is very driven by, in terms of energy and in terms of carbon, by couriers, yeah, which for manufacturing is quite can be quite normal, depending what they're manufacturing, because some places manufacture lots and lots of widgets and send them out regularly, so they have other people manufacture bigger stuff and send them out irregularly. So, but definitely capturing the data is the way I would suggest you do. I mean, Laurie, would you say the same thing from your perspective?
Yeah, it's just that, it's that idea of capturing data first, have the processes in place, get visibility of it, and then it's an idea of how you gain insights. That's the key to it. It's getting the data first.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess that kind of ties in with the question that we've had come through that you'll be able to see in the chat box, which was about an SME supplying products into manufacturing companies, but obviously has a smaller footprint to start with. They're looking at reducing energy consumption, but other examples of other areas that can take to reduce our emissions. So do you think they're most likely to be business or behavioural process changes? So again, I don't know if that ties into looking at those tier 2s, looking at the other areas as well.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Without knowing what their sort of value chain or what looks like, it's difficult to say. But reducing electricity consumption, well, you can either reduce it, yeah, and that's, if you want to reduce it, that's putting in things like LED lighting if they don't have LED lighting. The other way you can look at it as well is what Laurie mentioned, and his is about replacing it. Yeah, so putting in solar PV, yeah, to sort of reduce that. Yeah, so you've got, it depends really on the business case around it, but in terms of electricity, yeah, that's what I would do. I would look at where am I using the electricity. Yeah, depends what type of factory they've got, depends what type of offices they've got, etc. And in terms of the other ones, business and behavioral process changes, Yeah, you can do it. The challenge on behavioural ones is as simple as, I mean, the other thing about electricity consumption is, if you look, there's two ways to look at electricity consumption. One is from a carbon perspective, one is from a cost. So you can reduce your carbon by just going to renewable energy. And renewable energy supplier doesn't reduce your cost, but reduces your carbon. And then you can look at, well, how do I reduce my overall consumption? Is what you're looking towards reducing here. Yeah, and the way to do that is to look at the processes. Yeah, your sort of your manufacturing processes. Yeah, and also your basically the way your building is set up in terms of lighting, in terms of heating, in terms of one of the things that you often find is buildings have been chopped and changed over the years, and so air conditioning is not run efficiently. Yeah, so it's sort of, you get air conditioning that crosses over two things. So looking at all of that can help you reduce your so it's looking at the whole building fabric and how the original design in terms of air conditioning and heating meets the requirements of today. Yeah, because there's been new offices put in place and stuff like that. That's what happens generally in buildings. Yeah, and then behavioural and process changes. Well, behavioural could be as simple as encouraging people to use public transport instead of coming in by cars if it's feasible. Yeah, it could be as simple as getting people to make sure they turn off computers at night. Yeah, that's about small power. And then the other side is the big power. Yeah, is looking at, well, can I? And this changes into the electricity as well as, do I need to look at my plant and see how efficient my plant is? Yeah, is there a business case there to upgrade my plant, because the new stuff that I can buy is a lot more energy efficient and a lot more and I can produce more for less. So there's a whole raft of stuff you can look into in manufacturing. Anything to add, Laurie?
No, I just think the only thing I'd add is it's absolutely everything's correct. The working from home culture has opened up a door for optimizing how people interact with spaces at work. So what you probably find is, pre-2021, people were in the office a lot more. Now that it's after that, there's probably things that, certain ventilation or heating or maybe the lighting as well, electricity consumption, all of these things that are how they're driven have been set up to operate in that. There's a big kind of optimization exercise. So there's lots to look at, whether that just be in this case, the electricity consumption, but there's lots and lots to kind of map out to get on top of. So.
Well, thank you both. I don't know if anyone's got any questions that can't either put it into the chat box or wants to raise their hand, or if there is anything else. Again, we will make this recording available afterwards. Are we okay to circulate copies of the slides? Would that be all right?
Yeah. I'll collate them into one pack. We can work on that afterwards, Laurie. We can collate it into one pack, and then I'll send it through to yourself and Katie.
That's great, thank you. And if anyone is watching this back and hasn't joined it live, then obviously if they just drop me a line, then obviously I can sort those out. I think we are now reaching the end of this meeting, because I think we were only scheduled till 11. So I am going to call it to a close. Just to say thank you to both of you today for joining us. It's been very much appreciated. Obviously, you can see the questions that have come through have been appreciated. And thanks to everyone who joined us online. As I say, if you've got any questions on this, if you want to drop an email through to either myself or Katie, then we can feed that back to John. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you, guys. Take care, everyone.